Hey everybody, it's Jay with Jay Digs History, and I'm coming to you normally from the hills and mountains of northern New Jersey on a metal detecting adventure, looking for history in the ground beneath our feet. Today is a little bit different. I'm coming to you from my backyard. It's because I've been working on a little project that was supposed to go with a video that I did earlier. Back in April, we attended, myself, All Metal Adrian, Digger Dilly, we attended Come Out Swingin out in southeastern Pennsylvania. Which was a great event. We had a great time. Unfortunately for us, we did not come up with a lot of finds, not a lot of video generated. So this was to be the opening of that video. Unfortunately, it never came to pass. I've been working on it here and there since then. And I do want to share it with you though. It comes with the history of the area that we were at. The Boyertown area was pretty neat. After the Philadelphia campaign, 10,000 of Washington's troops made their way to Boyertown, and literally a block or two away from where we were digging was a makeshift field hospital at a church for the Continental Army. It was an area that they stopped in when they went to go check on stores in the Reading area that they had, and as they made their way to the grueling winter out of Valley Forge. We had a great time there. So with that being said, let me take you back to a darker day in our history, September the 11th. Not the one that we are all, unfortunately, very familiar with, but 248 years earlier, in 1777. By the summer of 1777, the American Revolution has come to almost a standstill. Skirmishes here and there, minor battles here and there, but nobody really taking or gaining land. Washington's forces held up in New Jersey, and the commander of the British forces, General Howe, are held up in New York City. The British have a plan though. Their plan is a multi-pronged attack that would split New York and sever the New England colonies from the rest of the southern colonies. General John Burgoyne was to come down out of Quebec, as General Howe was to sail up the Hudson. The British figured, with the seat of the Revolution severed from the rest of the country, they could bring the conflict to an end. General Howe, on the other hand, had a different idea. His thought was to take the capital city of Philadelphia. In late summer of 1777, with 18,000 men, under the command of himself and General Cornwallis, they left New York Harbor and headed south along the New Jersey seaboard. Washington now knew Howe's plan. He knew where he was going and what he was going to do. Washington gathered his troops in New Jersey and started marching south for Philadelphia. As General Howe sailed south, he made a critical error. He overestimated the defenses of Delaware Bay and decided to continue going south to Chesapeake Bay. This bought Washington valuable time to maneuver his forces west of the Philadelphia area. Initially, Washington was heading about 30 miles west of Philadelphia. However, when he got there, the British had already landed and made their way to the same place. Washington double-backed to about 25 miles west of Philadelphia to this location here in Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania. Utilizing this house, the ring house behind me, as his headquarters, Washington set up a defensive line on the eastern side of what is known as Brandywine Creek. Chadds Ford was a shallow area along the Baltimore Pike that Washington figured would be the most likely place that Howe would cross his armies to get to Philadelphia. In the early morning hours of September 11th, Washington had pickets positioned on the western side of the river. Their job was to provide reconnaissance and stall the British advance little by little. They would attack and fall back, attack and fall back until they finally crossed the river. As the fog lifted and the sun rose that morning, British forces had set up in the farm fields and along the banks of the western side of the Brandywine. The British forces on the western banks began exchanging fire with Washington's forces on the eastern banks, and the Battle of Brandywine Creek had begun. Across the field is the Brandywine Creek. On the other side of the Brandywine Creek, in the hills and farm fields, a general by the name of von Knippenhausen was leading Hessian and British forces in their initial attack against Washington here on the eastern side of Brandywine. Washington, throughout the morning, is going to be plagued with poor and conflicting intelligence. He has no idea where the bulk of Howe and Cornwallis's armies are. As the battle commences throughout the day, Washington receives intelligence that convinces him he can send troops across the Brandywine. After he gets across the Brandywine and his troops engage the Hessians and the British, Washington now receives reports that the bulk of the British army is lying in wait in the shadows behind them. Now convinced that the Hessians and the British force that Washington is attacking are being used as bait, instead of attacking further, Washington pulls his men back across the Brandywine to the eastern side. Fortunately for Washington, his day is about to change drastically. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Washington would come to feel the failure of his intelligence reports. Washington did not know that General Howe and General Cornwallis went 17 miles out of their way and traveled north up the Brandywine and ended up crossing at an unprotected ford known as Jeffrey's Ford. In the early afternoon of September 11th, Howe and Cornwallis, their men needed a break. They stopped on Osborne Hill to kind of regroup and refresh, knowing that they were about to battle the Continentals. Washington had strong intelligence now saying where the British were, and he knew where the bulk of the army was, and it was coming down his right flank. This is not the first time Howe has outflanked Washington and used this tactic against him. Several times, Washington failed to realize and protect his flank. The most notable, Howe exploited an unprotected pass in Brooklyn Heights and outflanked Washington, pushing him back across the river into Manhattan. This time at Brandywine, Howe and Cornwallis took the bulk of their army and came down from the north. Once Washington was aware of what was happening, he dispatched General Stevens, General Sterling, and General Sullivan to his northern flank, assigning them to protect the Birmingham Road near the Birmingham Meeting House. And even though Howe and Cornwallis stopped to take a break, by the time the generals were able to organize, the British were on the move. These peaceful rolling hills behind me were once the scene of one of the major battles of the Revolution. Men from both sides fought and died as the Continentals tried to protect the advance to Philadelphia. Once a blood-soaked battlefield, now sits hallowed ground in the peaceful farm fields of southeastern Pennsylvania. As the battle here on Birmingham Hill raged on, that was the cue for von Knippenhausen to cross the Brandywine and start tightening the noose on Washington, putting him into battle on two fronts. Ultimately, Sterling, Stevens, and Sullivan would be overrun. The British forces were better trained, had larger numbers, and were well experienced. It is not to say that the generals and their men did not fight valiantly. They put up a good fight, and the British learned a lesson that day. As the evening hours descended upon the Continentals, Washington was forced to retreat. He would make his way to Chester, Pennsylvania, leaving General Greene and General Anthony Wayne in the rear to protect the retreating troops. It is possible that General Greene's men inflicted some of the heaviest casualties to the British at the very end of the fight. As they took up a defensive position, the sun was setting in the west, silhouetting the British, making them easy targets for Greene and his men. General Greene and Anthony Wayne gave time for Washington to regroup his forces and move to Chester. General Howe and General Cornwallis did not follow suit. They had been beaten, they had been battered, and they knew that trying to chase Washington through the night would not bode well for them. As Washington made his way to Chester that night, British forces took rest here in the Brandywine, Chadds Ford area. Over the next several days after the Battle of Brandywine, the two generals moved their men around southeastern Pennsylvania like chess pieces on a board. There was the Battle of the Clouds, which was nothing more than a skirmish that took place during a nor'easter and didn't gain anything for anybody. Washington was going to make another stand at the Schuylkill River. This time he was going to use a local Pennsylvanian and the Pennsylvanian army that he commanded, General Anthony Wayne, to lay in wait for the British to move past. As the British were moving, Wayne's responsibility would be to attack the supply trains in the rear and help push the British to the Schuylkill River and pincer them in. He was also tasked with meeting up with a band of Maryland militia that were making their way up into the area to support the cause. Wayne moved his troops here to two farm fields just outside of what is now Malvern, Pennsylvania, in an area known as Paoli's Tavern. Wayne brought his men here and set up camp just 2 miles from the British main army's encampment. They stayed here, watching and waiting for the British to make their move. Once the British were on the move, Wayne would take his men and do as he was told and attack the rear guard. What Wayne didn't know, however, is that his position had been compromised. How was it compromised? Nobody is really sure. It could have been loyalists to the cause who were captured by British and squeezed for information, very good British intelligence, or loyalists to the crown that gave away Wayne's position. Either way, Wayne's position was compromised, and the events that took place here would forever be remembered. Fateful evening of September 20th, in the dark of night, British forces led by General Gray would make their way to these farm fields and attack Anthony Wayne's position. General Gray would order his men to unload their rifles, take out their flints, and fix bayonets. He wanted the element of surprise and did not want any accidental discharges of a rifle giving away his position. As stealthy and as coordinated as Gray's attack would be, Anthony Wayne was alerted of his presence as he drew close. Wayne was able to start mustering his men and getting them into position. And in the distance, Wayne's pickets could be heard making a couple short musket fires before they were quickly overrun. As Wayne's men stood in pitch black and night waiting, suddenly, at full sprint, with fixed bayonets and swords swinging, British forces came out of the darkness and crashed into Wayne's men. The first wave hit them, and chaos ensued. To make matters worse, the second wave and the third wave were coming right behind them. Like waves from a hurricane crashing into a beach, the British soldiers plowed right into Wayne's armies. Wayne's men, now in full retreat, panic ensuing, and pitch black, are met by this fence. Stumbling, trying to get across it, trying to get over it, trying to get away from the British. They are now bottlenecked. An opening that Wayne's men had made earlier is now clogged by a broken cannon. The British forces continued their attack, slashing and stabbing as they moved along. Wayne's men were on the run. What was left of Wayne and his men were able to meet up with the Maryland militia, but the British were still in chase, and the ferocity of the British caused the militia to break apart and dissipate. Wayne was able to regroup what he could and retreat. Behind me here lies a monument. It is the second oldest war memorial in the United States, erected 40 years after the Battle of Paoli. It is guarded by 2 cannons. Lying under the monument are the remains of 53 Continental soldiers who died on this battlefield. It is said that only 3 British soldiers lost their lives that night. The Battle at Paoli would become a huge propaganda machine for the Continentals. It was not a gentlemanly attack, and we were still fighting gentlemen's wars back then. It was at night, under stealth, with just bayonets and swords. Some Continentals claim that even wounded were continuously stabbed until dead and given no quarter. The Battle of Paoli would be used to fuel the fire support for the Continental Army and the resolve of the Loyalists to the infant nation that is now born. Anthony Wayne ultimately would have his reputation tarnished by this battle, and he actually demanded a court-martial to clear his name, which it did. After the Battle of Paoli, Washington had critical choices to make. Does he defend Philadelphia, orders to protect his supplies and stores north in the Reading area. Supplies and stores that he would badly need to get through the winter of 1777. Washington made the decision to protect the stores, and on September 26, 1777, General Howe walked into Philadelphia and took up residence in Germantown just outside the city. In October, Washington would try to defeat Howe in a surprise attack on Germantown, and once again would fail. After that, Washington would move his armies north and begin the long and grueling winter at Valley Forge. By the closing of 1777, the Philadelphia campaign comes off as a complete failure. Washington has been driven back at every turn, the Continental Congress is on the run, and the capital city of Philadelphia has fallen to the British. Independence for this infant nation seems fleeting. Amidst everything that has gone wrong, there are some small slivers of hope. For the first time in the war, Washington's armies would retreat and regroup in a much more organized way than they ever have. I mentioned that at the Battle of Brandywine, the British had learned a lesson. That lesson was they were no longer fighting idealistic farmers that were just unorganized. They now had a strengthening army that they had to face. Although the Continentals were not as experienced or had the numbers of the British regulars, they were becoming a formidable enemy, and the British were realizing that. As the days started to grow shorter, and the end of the year approaching, Washington would take up residence in Valley Forge, where his army would face the grueling winter ahead. General Howe's decision to take Philadelphia would start to show its repercussions. General Burgoyne in the north in October was defeated at the Battle of Saratoga. This meant that England's hope of splitting the colonies in two would never come to pass. Ultimately, General Howe, while in Philadelphia, would resign his position as commander in the colonies and return to England. Across the Atlantic, England's sworn enemy of France is watching what's going on in the colonies very intently. Benjamin Franklin is working hard to try to gain an alliance with France to help turn the tide of the war. During the Philadelphia campaign, a young Frenchman by the name of Marquis de Lafayette, who was becoming a well-respected general in Washington's army, had been reporting back to France the abilities and gaining strengths of the American army. Coupled with his encouragement, and with seeing the defeat of Burgoyne at Saratoga, Ben Franklin is now able to secure an alliance with France and change the face of this war. In the spring of 1778, Washington would bring in a General von Steuben from Austria. Von Steuben is pretty much credited with setting the foundation for all U.S. military training, even today. With his help, and with Washington able to secure re-enlistments and recruitment, the Continental Army would grow stronger and stronger. Eventually, France would send ships and manpower to aid in the fight. 6 years would go by since the Philadelphia campaign before, at the Treaty of Paris, the revolution would officially come to an end, and the United States would now be a known power throughout the world. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this little trip into the Revolutionary War history that I put together. I learned a lot making it. I really enjoyed it. I had a great time out at Come Out Swingin with the Boyertown Area Historical Society. They put that together. It was a great, great event. Like I said, I didn't find much. Other people did. There were some really neat things found at that event. And I look forward to going to it next year. The area is rich with history. And, you know, just the day that I spent there driving around and going to different battlefields, you know, showed it. That's why I like doing this. That's why I like going out metal detecting, you know? There's so much history beneath our feet, it's amazing. And, you know, we're just, excuse the pun, we're scratching the surface. So, if you like this, I hope you did. I know it's not metal detecting, and I know it's not Discovery Channel quality, but I had fun. And I wish I could have put it with my other video, but, you know, I had fun doing it. And I'm glad I finally, you know, got to post it here. So Like, subscribe, share, comment, do whatever. And until next time, see ya.